I'm not proud of what I did. But when a person turns your most painful loss into gossip, you stop being kind. And at her wedding, I gave her a chance to destroy herself. I'm 31, female, and until last year, I thought I understood what humiliation felt like. I was wrong. Nothing prepared me for the kind that crawls under your skin and stays there, whispering that you'll never be safe again. It started in the office bathroom, the one on the third floor, where the lights flicker like a dying heart monitor. I was 8 weeks pregnant. It wasn't planned, but when those two pink lines showed up, I felt something like hope for the first time in years. Then, in that bathroom, that hope literally fell apart in my hands. I remember the smell of disinfectant, the taste of metal in my mouth, my legs shaking so badly I thought they might give out. There was so much blood. I was sitting on the cold tile, trying to call 911, when the door creaked open and Selma, our office gossip queen, walked in. She froze, eyes wide, then knelt next to me. "I'll call an ambulance," she whispered. I was crying too hard to answer. Before the paramedics came, I grabbed her wrist. "Please," I begged, my throat raw. "Don't tell anyone. Please, Selma." She looked at me with this fake softness, the kind she uses when she wants to seem like she has a soul. Of course not. I would never. 2 days later, I came back to work because staying home meant sitting in silence with that empty feeling inside me. My manager pulled me aside, voice dripping with sympathy. "I heard about your loss," he said. "Take all the time you need." I felt my stomach drop. I hadn't told him. I hadn't told anyone. By noon, I'd gotten 7 texts. "Thinking of you. So sorry for your loss." People from accounting, marketing, HR, people who barely even knew my last name. The story had already spread, not just that I'd miscarried, but details, fabricated ones. Selma told everyone I'd been trying for years. That she found me in time and saved my life. That I almost bled out on the floor. She made herself the hero of my tragedy. I remember standing by the vending machine, hearing 2 coworkers whisper, "It's so sad, poor thing." And Selma, she's such a good friend, I wanted to scream, to tear the words out of their mouths, but instead I just went to the bathroom, the same stall, and locked the door. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped my phone. That was the moment something inside me hardened. I wasn't going to cry anymore. If Selma loved stories so much, I was going to give her one she'd never forget. For the next few weeks, I moved through work like a ghost. People kept giving me that pitying half smile in the hall, the kind that says, "I know something about you that you wish I didn't." Selma floated around like some kind of office angel, taking credit for being my support system. She'd lower her voice when I walked in, pat my arm during meetings, perform her fake compassion for anyone watching. I started avoiding the break room entirely. Couldn't stand seeing her there, perched on the counter, spinning stories while people leaned in, like disciples. She always had her nails done, bright red, and I used to stare at them while she waved her hands around, laughing about someone else's mistake, someone else's secret. It hit me that she'd used those same hands to call the ambulance for me. Then one afternoon, I overheard her talking to our receptionist. "I just feel so connected to her now," she said, voice dripping with self-importance. "When you go through something like that together, it bonds you forever, you know?" I almost dropped the stack of invoices in my hands. Bonded. Like we were some kind of trauma sisters. That's when I realized she wasn't sorry. She never would be. She saw my pain as material.
Hey guys, real quick before we keep going, don't forget to sub and drop a like if you're enjoying the story. Thank you very much. Enjoy watching.
Around that time, Selma started flashing a diamond ring the size of a grape. Her fiancé, Nick, had proposed after 3 years of dating, and she made sure everyone knew the story down to the minute. Sunset on the pier, champagne, he got down, on one knee. Every day she brought in some new wedding update. Venues, flowers, seating charts. And she invited me, personally, cornered me by the copier, with that bright, fake smile. "You're coming, right? You have to be there, after everything we've been through." I wanted to spit in her face, but instead I smiled. Of course. Wouldn't miss it. That night, I sat on my couch in the dark, scrolling through her Instagram. She'd just posted a quote. "Loyalty is everything in love and friendship." My thumb hovered over the screen, trembling. I don't even know when the idea formed, but once it did, I couldn't let it go. If she wanted loyalty, I'd give her the illusion of it. I'd make her trust me again, confide in me, lower her guard completely. I'd let her think she'd won, that I'd forgiven her. And then, on the day she cared about most, I'd make sure she destroyed herself, using the very thing she couldn't resist, gossip. I texted my cousin Rachel that night. She works in PR and loves a bit of drama. "I need a favor," I wrote. "It's going to sound insane, but hear me out." Her reply came fast. "If this is about that witch from your office, I'm listening." That was the first spark of the plan, the one that would end Selma's perfect little fairy tale in flames. Rachel texted back a minute later with 3 fire emojis, and God help me, the words, "Fine, tell me everything." That was when it stopped being imaginary and became a plan I could taste. I met Rachel at a coffee shop 2 days later. She arrived in a pencil skirt and a PR smile, everything calibrated for optics, and her husband, Aaron, came too because Rachel insisted on boundaries. I'd never met Aaron before that day. He was quieter than she was, with a movie star jaw and a laugh that made my chest ache, in a different way. I needed both of them. Rachel's appetite for drama and Aaron's willingness to play a calm, public role if things went sideways. We sat at a corner table where nobody could overhear. I told them the bathroom story in a halting voice, left out nothing of the humiliation and how Selma had turned my worst moment into the office's latest lunch special. I watched Rachel's face switch from curiosity to fierce focus. She clicked her pen like a weapon. How far do you want this to go? She asked. She did not say should, that would have been conscience. She asked how far I wanted to hurt the woman who had hurt me. I did not want to say everything out loud because saying it made it real. But I told them the part that was the hook. Rachel's husband at the Marriott, holding hands with another guest, Jessica, a woman who was absolutely not involved with Aaron, who trusted him and hated gossip, even more than I did. I chose them because Rachel had a honeymoon to plan and kids-in-laws in the mix. They would be believable targets. I needed a domestic image that could be perverted into a scandal that Selma would clutch like a prize. Rachel blinked, smiled, and then, because she's Rachel, started strategizing. We can do this really clean, she said. I'll be in on it. Act like nothing's wrong. Aaron will be loving in public. If Selma runs with it, she won't have anything real to show. She'll either invent proof or freeze when someone asks for it. Rachel's fingers tapped her phone like she was already scheduling the scandal. Aaron surprised me. He was calmer than I felt I had a right to be. I don't want Jessica dragged into this, he said quietly. But if you need me to stand up and call out the lie publicly, make sure it ends tonight, I'll do it. He reached across the table and squeezed Rachel's hand. I felt that squeeze as permission and a tiny guilty relief that the plan had a safe exit. We rehearsed the exact wording I would use when I cornered Selma, how to sound fragile and private yet irresistible. We rehearsed her likely responses, the performative sympathy, the quick pivot to, I only told a few people, the little dramatic gasps. Rachel insisted I keep my voice low when I planted the seed, because Selma loved the intimacy of secrets, and would tell the second she believed she had exclusive access. The week before the wedding, I followed every step we'd practiced. At lunch, I lingered in the break room, until Selma came in, chatting about table decor. Like she practiced being thrilled. The kettle hissed, fluorescent lights buzzed, people walked past, and left us alone. My palms were wet inside my pockets. I almost walked away a dozen times. Instead, I leaned in and whispered the exact lie we'd rehearsed. I watched her face change the way a lit match changes paper. First curiosity, then a kind of savage delight. She whispered back, breath hot with eagerness. Promise you won't tell anyone? I swear I won't say a word. She didn't mean it. She never did. And when she said it, something cold and awful unknotted in my chest. There was no turning back. I wore my dress because I wanted to blend in. Plain black, muted, nothing that would draw attention to me. I sat at table 7 like a ghost watching a play I'd written and hoped I could leave the theater before the curtain call. The garden was perfect. String lights like little witnesses, the florist's white peonies, heavy as secrets, the aisle strewn with petals. Selma looked incandescent, makeup sharp, hair done, Nick's hand like a claim on her waist. I told myself this was necessary. I told myself no one would get hurt except the liar. Cocktail hour blurred into the first course. Selma circulated like a conductor, voice lower than the music, feeding people the seed I'd planted into her ear. I watched it happen in slow motion. She pulled her sister aside, then her college roommate, then the woman who did the catering. Each conversation took under a minute. I could see her eyes shine the way they do when she's discovered a rumor she can eat alive. My chest opened and closed, like someone hitting a bellows. By the time plates were cleared, the rumor had mutated. It wasn't I saw Aaron at the Marriott anymore. It was, Aaron and Jessica were holding hands in the bar. Then, they were seen leaving together. Then, there are screenshots. I could feel the temperature in the room change, oxygen thinning, voices slipping to whispers that carried like knives. Then the music stopped. It was one of those cinematic silences that people only ever experience in bad movies, or very true life. Nick stood. He was smiling at first, maybe a reflex for the camera, but then his face hardened as he scanned the room and the whispers rolled into his ears. He walked to the head table, set his napkin down, and said, "Whoever started this, show me the proof, please." His voice was calm, but his hands shook so violently the microphone skipped. You could hear forks clink, like tiny alarm bells. Selma's smile fractured. She opened her mouth, small forced syllables, and accused someone across the room. Someone shouted, "Who told you that?" Laughter tried to fill the space and failed. The maid of honor, Rachel, who'd played her part like a saint, had the most terrible look on her face, patient, then terrible. Rachel's husband, Aaron, who'd been standing nearby pretending to photograph friends, set his phone down, slowly. Aaron's voice was low when he stood. He wasn't yelling, he didn't have to. "This is a lie," he said, "and I'm not letting this ruin my family's night. We've already drafted a demand letter. We'll be talking to council tomorrow." Calm words, but they landed like stones. The groom's jaw went slack. Selma's pupils dilated with panic. She lunged, not metaphorically. She grabbed a centerpiece, the vase sliding like a small, desperate missile from her hands. It smashed across the table, water and peonies and glass exploding everywhere. A bridesmaid screamed. Someone's champagne flute toppled and fractured against the wooden floor. Selma started yelling, not the pretty performative gasp she used at downstairs gossip sessions, but a raw, animal sound. You're lying to ruin me. She shoved a table over. Plates slid off and clattered like broken promises. Nick shoved past her, furious. He grabbed Selma's arm so hard there was a bruise blooming a week later. He shouted, Not here, not like this. His face was red, a man seeing his marriage unravel in real time, his hands the size of the calm that vanished. In the doorway, security closed in. Guests backed away, phones rose like flashbulbs. Rachel sat still, perfect and empty, while her husband's legal words echoed. The groom, Nick, turned to the crowd. In a voice I'll carry forever. If you can't stand here and tell my wife the truth, then we have nothing to build on. He didn't say divorce yet, but it was there, a fracture in the sentence. The room collapsed into chaos. Someone sobbed, someone cursed, a child started screaming from a corner where an aunt clutched them tight. I watched Selma's face as the consequences landed. For a breath I felt ridiculous and immediate vindication. Then her eyes locked on mine, and in them I saw every future I'd traded for a single night. A marriage imploding, an attorney's stamp. A woman on the floor of a reception surrounded by shards of her own making. The sound of a chair tipping and a vase breaking became the moment I realized revenge had a weight heavier than I'd imagined. The morning after felt like living inside an aftershock. My phone blew up before my first coffee. Texts, voicemails. 3 missed calls from Rachel. A screenshot from an anonymous guest with a caption. You did that. Wow. I could taste copper in my mouth. The world loved a scandal for exactly 24 hours, and then it loved assigning blame. Nick had left the venue with his jaw set and a stack of napkins shoved into his pocket like evidence. By noon, Aaron sent a photo of a crisp letterhead, a demand letter from counsel addressed to Selma, listing the accusations and threatening litigation. Rachel's text read, We did what we had to. I'm so sorry it blew up. Her sorry was kind, practical, less about me and more about containment. I wanted a shoulder that would hold my crying the way the paramedics had tried to hold me on the tile that day. Instead, I got logistics. Then, the retaliation started, not from Nick or Aaron, but from Selma herself. She couldn't accept being shown up. That wasn't in her script. First, it was small, an email to the office listserv, accusing someone of setting her up. So coy it read like a mystery dinner party invite. She hinted I'd orchestrated something malicious and suggested people be careful who they confided in. That sliver of insinuation slid under the door of my life and widened into a crack. 3 nights later, I found my car keyed across the passenger door in a precise, angry line and my tires deflated. A sticky note tucked under the wiper read, Watch your back. My hands went numb when I saw it. I walked around the car, looking for cameras, for evidence that this was anything but petty vandalism. And I kept feeling the same childish fury I'd looked at in Selma's face that night. You made me look stupid. You'll pay. She started showing up where I worked. Not subtle visits, loud dramatic entries that sucked breath from the break room. At first she yelled about lies, then she grabbed a framed company award from the receptionist's shelf and hurled it against the wall. Glass sang across the linoleum. The receptionist sobbed. People clustered in doorways, phones already filming. Selma cried crocodile tears, voice high, then meteor. She set me up. I was humiliated. She weaponized being wronged into a spectacle. HR had to escort her out. We all watched her stomp past my desk like she wanted the whole office to smell her fury. I stopped sleeping. At 3 a.m., I opened a tab and typed medical privacy law until my eyes blurred. I emailed HR before dawn and copied the manager who told me to take time after the miscarriage. I typed the bathroom sequence in a file, exact times, names of people who texted condolences. I attached photos of my car and the note. My hands shook, writing the words, violation of medical confidentiality. They sounded so formal for something that felt like being skinned alive. Valerie from HR replied within an hour. She asked to meet. Her call made me cry in the elevator. I changed my shirt in the bathroom because my sweater smelled like cigarette smoke and fear. That afternoon, sitting across from her in a small windowless office, I read the bathroom story out loud and watched her take notes. She didn't gasp. She didn't dramatize. She underlined consent not given and said plainly, This is serious. We will investigate. Out in the hall, the office hummed like a hive that remembered how to sting. Selma kept posting on social media snippets of victimhood, comments calling me vindictive and dangerous, and worst of all, reposts of the old office whispers she'd started about my miscarriage. She'd weaponized my grief twice, first by telling it, then by re-traumatizing me online. Walking back to my desk after the HR meeting, I felt odd and exposed, like someone had taken a photograph of my ribs. I had triggered something I could not put back in the box, but I had also opened a path to formal accountability. It didn't feel like victory. It didn't feel like relief. It felt like the beginning of a long, expensive, and painfully necessary fight. And for the first time since the bathroom floor, I couldn't remember what I was allowed to cry about first. The child I lost, or the life that was being shredded around me. HR moved fast. Within a week, the conference room at the end of the hall turned into a quiet storm zone. Valerie called me in first, professional and soft-spoken, asking for details I'd already rehearsed in my nightmares, the exact words Selma had said, the people who'd texted me, thinking of you. what I'd overheard in the break room. She told me they'd be interviewing Selma next, then Brooks from accounting, the one who'd seen Selma talking about my tragic loss by the coffee machine. Brooks was one of the good ones, the kind of person who minds his own business until you're bleeding out emotionally and need someone sane to witness it. While the investigation brewed, the office turned tense. You could feel it in the quiet, the way people shut their laptops. When I walked in, unsure if I was radioactive now. The gossip died overnight. No one dared whisper, not even about harmless stuff. Selma had become the office warning sign, and I, by extension, was the proof that consequences had teeth. Then one afternoon, I saw her leaving the HR wing. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her jaw locked, her entire body humming with fury barely contained. She saw me and froze. For a second, I thought she might actually charge at me. Instead, she spat, "You'll regret this." Her voice shook, not from fear, but from humiliation, the same kind she'd once served me cold. I didn't answer. I just walked past her, but my heart was hammering so loud I could feel it in my teeth. The next morning, Valerie called me back in. "The investigation's complete," she said, sliding a folder across the table. I expected a slap on the wrist for Selma, maybe a polite warning, but Valerie laid it out plainly. Brooks had provided written documentation, dates, quotes, witnesses. Several other coworkers confirmed Selma had shared my miscarriage story with extra embellishments. HR had issued a formal written warning that would go on her permanent record, plus mandatory workplace privacy training. It wasn't termination, but it was real. It was official. Selma's mask of harmless gossip was gone. The following week, she barely showed her face in the office. When she did, it was like a ghost haunting her own cubicle. She avoided eye contact, her usual loud laughter replaced by clipped whispers over her phone. But she didn't vanish quietly. I'd hear her sobbing, in the stairwell sometimes. Ugly, ragged sounds that made me flinch even when I told myself she deserved it. Then came the text from Rachel's husband, Aaron. We sent the formal letter. She responded with an apology through her lawyer. Generic, no accountability, but it's on record. I should have felt victorious. I didn't. That night, I sat in my apartment with all the lights off, scrolling through social media. Selma had deleted her wedding photos, every single one. The perfect fairy tale feed was replaced with a blank grid and one story that read, "Be careful who you trust." I closed my phone and felt something heavy crack open inside me. Not guilt exactly, but grief coming back. In a new disguise. I'd won, technically. HR sided with me. The wedding fallout ruined her reputation, but none of it brought back what I'd lost on that bathroom floor. None of it made the silence in my apartment any less brutal. For the first time, I wondered if revenge was just another way of keeping her inside my head. The next week, therapy started. I hadn't planned on it. It was one of those things you tell yourself you'll do someday after you fix everything else. But Rachel wouldn't stop texting links to local trauma counselors. I picked the one with the soonest opening. Her name was Kendra. Her office was too calm. Neutral tones, salt lamp, box of tissues that looked preemptively sad. She asked why I was there, and I told her about a betrayal at work. I meant to keep it vague, but the words started spilling out. The bathroom, the blood. Selma's fake sympathy, the way she'd turned my tragedy into a punchline for the break room, the wedding, the lie I'd planted like a seed and watched grow into chaos. Kendra didn't interrupt, didn't judge, just listened. When I finished, she asked, "How did it feel when it was all over?" I expected to say relieved. Instead, what came out was empty, like I'd been running on fire, and when it burned out, there was nothing left but smoke. She nodded, like she'd heard it before. "That emptiness isn't failure," she said. "It's your body realizing revenge doesn't metabolize grief." That line stuck to my ribs. A few days later, I found out from Brooks that Selma's husband, Nick, had moved out. "He's staying with a friend," Brooks said carefully, like saying, too much would break some kind of HR code. I nodded, pretending it didn't affect me. But later, driving home, I realized I felt two things at once, a flicker of satisfaction and a wave of nausea. I dismantled her life so thoroughly that even her marriage, the thing she used as a prop for her perfect image, was gone. The guilt hit hard that night. I stared at the old sonogram photo on my fridge, the one I hadn't been able to throw away, and thought about how much time I'd spent destroying Selma instead of grieving the baby I'd lost. I'd been so consumed by anger that I never stopped to sit with what that loss actually meant. Kendra said something about making space for grief instead of running from it. So that weekend, I tried. I bought a small maple tree from a nursery outside town, the kind with red leaves that burn like sunset when the season changes. My mom let me plant it in her backyard. She didn't ask why until halfway through digging the hole when she noticed my hands shaking. I told her everything, the miscarriage, the betrayal, the revenge. She didn't scold me or try to comfort me with platitudes. She just said softly, "You've been carrying too many ghosts, honey. Let one of them rest." When I lowered the tree into the ground, I cried for the first time without anger in it. Real, raw grief, the kind that doesn't ask for witnesses. My mom knelt beside me and said she'd lost a pregnancy once too, years before me. We sat there together in the dirt. Two women who both carried something they couldn't keep, and for a moment, the ache in my chest felt like something sacred instead of shameful. By Monday, the air at work felt different. The HR warning had clipped Selma's wings. No more loud gossip, no more cornering coworkers with, "Did you hear?" She kept to herself now, quiet, smaller somehow. For the first time in months, I could breathe without feeling like I was waiting for her next move. But that night, when I got home, I realized something else. I didn't need her silence to feel safe anymore. I needed my own. 2 weeks later, I got the email that changed everything. Subject line, department transfer, approved. I read it 3 times, half convinced it was a mistake. But it wasn't. Valerie had signed off on it herself. I was moving to the digital marketing team on the 5th floor, a clean slate away from the cubicle where everything had burned down. When I told my manager, he smiled in that awkward, dad-like way and said, "You've handled a lot with grace. I'm glad you're staying in the company." I wanted to laugh. Grace wasn't the word for what I'd done. But maybe that was the point. Starting fresh didn't mean pretending I'd been perfect. It meant living with what I'd learned. Selma barely looked up when I packed my things. Her desk was still there, but the energy around it was different. She wore her hair tied back now, no more bright lipstick or loud perfume. She said, "Good morning sometimes, careful, cautious." The gossip chain that used to orbit her had broken apart. No one wanted to be next. A week before my transfer, Valerie called me in for a final follow-up discussion. She said HR considered the matter closed. Selma had completed her privacy training and received her official warning. "We're glad to see both of you maintaining professionalism," she added. Her words were polite, but they landed heavy. Both of you. She didn't know about the wedding, but I could tell she sensed there was more history between us than her report captured. That evening, I sat down at my kitchen table and wrote a letter I never planned to send. To Selma, I wrote that what she did, sharing my miscarriage, inventing details for sympathy, was cruel beyond words. That I'll never forget sitting in that bathroom, begging her to keep it quiet, and realizing later that she turned my pain into her story. But I also wrote that what I did at her wedding was deliberate, calculated, and wrong in its own way. I'd wanted her to drown in humiliation the way I had, and she did. But when the chaos settled, I was still standing in the ashes of my own anger. 3 pages. I folded them once and slipped them into my desk drawer, beside the sonogram photo. Some truths don't need witnesses, they just need a place to rest. That weekend, I went to my parents' house and sat by the maple tree. It had already grown new leaves, small bright green things that shimmered in the wind. My mom brought me coffee and didn't say a word. I told her about the transfer, about therapy, about how tired I was of carrying bitterness around like armor. She smiled and said, "Then maybe it's time to put it down." So I did. I let it go, at least enough to breathe. The following Monday, I walked into my new department and met a team that didn't know my story, didn't look at me like I was tragedy wrapped in office gossip. Brooks texted later, saying the office felt lighter these days. I smiled at that. Maybe something good came from the wreckage, an unspoken shift in how people treated each other. Kendra's last words from therapy echoed in my mind. You can't rewrite the past, but you can choose who you are in the next chapter. I looked out the window of my new office and whispered to the little life I'd lost, "We're okay now." And for the first time since the bathroom floor, I actually meant it.